He said. At 6 o'clock, everybody stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. We have a motion to open up a public hearing on the Comcast franchise. So moved. All in favor, aye. Aye. So Comcast is asked to renew their contract, their annual contract there?
It is I believe could be a 15-year contract. I think they can speak to that.
They're
Here or online. I can't.
Do we have a representative of Comcast here?
Yes, Melissa Pierce.
Go ahead. Do you want to talk to this at all?
I mean, basically I'm sort of more here just to listen. Actually, I'm hoping to get my video going here, so I won't just be a blank screen. But, again, this is a proposed renewal agreement, which has it's for a 10-year term. And, it really has more updated language than the current agreement, which was actually negotiated by Adelphia many, many years ago. And because we acquired Adelphia's assets back in 2006.
Okay. And this is just to continue service in the areas you currently cover?
Exactly.
Yep. Okay. I don't see an issue with this. This doesn't affect anything from.
It doesn't. The only thing that's really negotiable typically in these cable franchise arrangements is the franchise fee that many communities frequently collect. My understanding is that this community is not favored collecting a fee, because that fee that the town would ultimately or otherwise get simply is an amount that gets added on to each cable subscriber's bill. So my bet is, not wanting to burden cable customers with even more expense, the town likely waived it.
Do we have any idea of how much annual revenue that fee would?
There's a 5% maximum, I believe, but perhaps Melissa can talk about kind of what that means.
Okay. So with this, actually, I don't have figures on what that would generate. So that's something.
Do you have the figure of what the total dollar amount for the 10-year agreement is?
So no, I don't have those figures because currently we are not collecting a franchise fee from cable television customers in Canaan.
Many customers. Let's try that.
How many customers in Canaan?
So hang on here just a second. Let me get that number. So currently there are, let's see, hang on.
Mm-hmm.
There are about 650 cable television customers. And again, the franchise fee is only assessed on cable television customers. And that's federal law that restricts it to only cable television customers.
And do you have a sense of what the average customer pays for that service?
I don't. Again, that's something I would have to get data from my finance team because they would have to calculate what the gross revenues are for cable television service to figure out what that would be.
Does anybody in the room other than the chairman want to offer what they pay for cable?
Yeah, so it's like I'm paying for TV $207 a month, and if it was 5% add-on, I'd have to pay an additional $120 a year or more.
Okay.
Some of those
For how?
Some of those prices are package deals, which includes the telephone, includes the internet. So you probably have to track that and look at only the TV portion.
Just the cable and television portion as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
So my thought process behind this is if it brings theoretically
$6,000.
Hypothetical numbers, right? Say it brings $10,000 of revenue to the town, but it only increases everybody's cable bill by $7 a year. I'll eat $7 a year to bring some revenue to the town. So if I could see those numbers a little better, would help me make my decision.
If you had 600 customers
Hmm.
and you get $200 a month,
Hmm.
that's $120,000 a year. And 5% of that is $6,000.
Okay,
If, now,
right. And then if we got $6,000 a year and it increased everybody's bill, do we have a if on that, Jack?
well, it would increase everybody's bill 5%.
5% on the, would it be on their overall billing, or do you folks have the ability to separate that so it's just for what they're paying for their actual cable usage?
So we, for customers who are in a, a multi-product bundle, there is a way of how we allocate revenues from the bundle. So, but again, it's only on a cable television service. And, this is a fee that, certainly if, people that subscribe to Satellite Dish, they don't have to pay it. And, and certainly it's not anything that's assessed on over the top streaming services, which is, definitely a way that many people are now getting video content.
So it's about $10.
How many communities are collecting that? Melissa, do you have an idea?
I'd say let's see, off the top of my head, of the 26 communities that are part of Comcast Western New England region, I mean, maybe it's about like 10 of the communities are currently collecting a franchise fee.
When is the current contract up? Melissa, when's the current contract up?
So, well, technically, this agreement did expire in 2017, and we've been just continuing to operate under the terms of that agreement.
Okay.
Do we have any sense of why it hasn't officially been renewed?
I mean, it was one of these, I'm not 100% sure. But it's one of these things that we're taking a look at some of these to see if, can sort of get some things cleaned up.
Okay.
What are the alternatives to this?
Well, one thing, otherwise we would continue to operate under the terms of the existing agreement, even though it's expired. And so basically nothing would change.
Their carryover agreement.
Yes.
Mark?
What's the added provisions on this one compared to the last contract? What's the difference in the contracts?
Yeah, between 2017 and 2023.
Well, no, the old contract would be 2006. So it would have been whatever the provisions were from 2006 to what she's changing the provisions of the contract. So what is the difference between that contract that went from 2006 to 2017
Exactly.
and what are we getting now what's the difference? Because she said there's some added provisions in there. So
Right.
what's
Between
changed?
17 and now, so yeah, can you speak to that, Melissa?
So one of the things is with the proposed agreement, there is an updated density requirement with the cable television franchise agreements. There is a density requirement at which, we would build out an area of, it would be, a certain number of homes per mile. So in this, in the, existing agreement, it's this really sort of this antiquated way of determining things because it's 25 homes per mile, but that doesn't include dish homes. And, that's just really, that's very cumbersome a way to figure things out. And this is much cleaner in that it's, if there are 20 homes per mile that, can be served by an aerial service drop or, or 40 that are underground.
And what are the differences in it between the old contract and what you're proposing, I guess, are there key differences? in the two contracts?
It's just, the language in the current contract, or it's just, it's old language. It was language that was used. Actually, I'm looking at this here by Frontier Vision, which was a subsidiary of Adelphia. And, it's like this, the proposed agreement. I mean, again, a more modern way of determining the qualifying density and, just have it, more current definitions. And there's some things, I'm sure I haven't gone through this in detail, but some references probably to technologies that frankly are outdated.
So in the sense of the agreement, is there a greater access than there was when the deal was struck? Less access, or about the same? In other words, there was a distance that you had to live within, and you'd connect, and if you're beyond that by a foot, you wouldn't connect. Are more people likely or able or eligible to connect than they have been in the past, if you know?
So yeah, with this, because we're going with just a straight 20 homes per mile for, it can be served aerially versus, this very outdated method of 25 homes, not including dish homes, so that right there, I think, is a positive for the town. And then, I mean, there is a 150-foot standard drop, although I know that, our construction team will, that actually sometimes they can go longer than that at no additional cost.
Hold on, Mark, Thomas.
I'm just wondering if at any time since 2006, but hopefully within the last recent era, I'm not sure what Comcast has done, but I'm wondering if we have done any sort of survey of the service. I'm a customer. I'd love to respond to a service survey. Because frankly, I'm not all that impressed, but the problem is it's kind of a monopoly.
Right.
And it has been, particularly for internet.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if
Yeah,
if any
well,
sort of service survey has been done. It seems to me that in considering a new contract with Comcast, the quality of the service that they're providing would be one of the considerations we want to take into account.
Well, I also think it's interesting that they're coming to us now.
5 years.
5 years
6 years,
in, right
yeah.
when Hub 66 and the co-op is putting high-speed network.
Oh, hey, look what's going on.
Mark? So it sounds to me like it's less access because the old system was what, 25 homes? Yeah. Now it's 20. It may be 20 homes, but they're not counting houses that have dish on that street.
No,
That's basically what she's saying. So it sounds like you're gonna have to pass more houses that are actually Comcast customers. So it sounds like a decrease in access. To me anyways. Yeah, Melissa, can you clarify what you meant by dish on the original contract?
So if back in the old days, if they were doing a ride out and they're going down the street and counting houses and they saw that there was a satellite dish on that house, then they would, not count that one. With what we're proposing, it's just 20 homes. A home is a home, and we don't care, because I mean, frankly, people could have an old satellite dish that's not in service mounted on their home, and we don't go knock, we're not going to go knock on doors. So it's a lot simpler just to say, okay, a house is a house.
I see, so it was 25 per mile and they excluded anything with the satellite, and now they've done 20 per mile and they're including no matter what, it's 20 houses, 20 houses. So I guess it depends on what mile you live on, whether it's more houses now or if there's more houses then, right? What it seems like, yeah. Okay.
Is there a competitor in the world?
Say that again.
Is there a competitor? Is there another company
Well, there will be.
for television? cable television.
Well, streaming, so.
Well, that won't have anything to do with
Cable access,
that, yeah.
it'll just be internet, right?
Right, it'd be internet access and streaming would be over the internet, so it wouldn't have anything to do with.
Okay,
With cable TV.
and
And Tom, this is a public hearing. The purpose of this is to perhaps give feedback to Consolidated if there's requests that the community has with respect to service or improvements or anything else. This wouldn't be a bad opportunity,
Well,
if you know what I mean.
I would be happy to tell Melissa that I think Comcast service has been less than adequate. I've had too many service calls where the service provider didn't understand the products that they were servicing. Most of the service people that I've dealt with know about cable TV, but don't know about the internet. I get phone service only because it costs me more not to get the phone service, which I think is ridiculous. The actual truth is, with Hub 66, with an internet provider, you would be able to get basically every channel you can get on cable TV. You can get it through Fubo, you can get it through Hulu, you can get it through YouTube. I mean, there are streaming services that are direct competitors. And you would not necessarily, once you have internet access, you would not necessarily need Comcast or any other cable provider. You could get it through streaming services. So as you know, someone said, there will be, or maybe it was Stephen, there will be competition for both internet and for television. But I would say I have personally found, and the fact that it has been a monopoly and there's really not another reasonable option, short of a dish or something like that, which I've used before and I find them inadequate.
Yeah.
But I found Comcast service seriously inadequate.
I personally feel like Comcast is one of those companies that is a classic example of too big to fail, and they don't really care whether you get the service that you need or not, because you're not going to go anywhere else, because that's basically the only show in town. So that's why that's where some of my questions are based from, and this is nothing directly at any representative of Comcast individually, so please don't take that, but you're the spokesperson for that organization, so. But if we didn't renew this contract, what are our options for the residents of Kingman?
They'll continue to do business as usual.
Well, you would stay in a carryover unless and until there was some, I'll say probably prolonged method to determine a competitor and figure out how that transition would take place and to figure out what the obstacles are. And I have no clue what those are.
But isn't the internet unregulated? So that you can have as many providers as want to provide the service? There is no monopoly on the internet. There's only a monopoly on the cable TV.
Right.
And the thing that cable TV provides you is the local channels. You can't get the local channels through the internet. You can get snippets of the local, you can get local news, but you can't get the rest of the programming. It's and you get this, you might get this program, but you can't get that program. So if you want true local TV, you got to get it through the cable TV company, and that's a monopoly. The rest of it's unregulated. Anybody can compete, and you may live on a street where you got all three providers. The co-op might be there, and Hub 66 might be there, and maybe it's Route 4. Maybe on Route 4 you got all three guys running down the street,
Right.
and you could pick any one of them.
Right.
Mark, you can get your local stations on streaming. Just so you know.
But I don't think you can get the whole thing.
I get all local stations.
I think it's pretty close, John. I really do. Yeah, the other thing I will say, just, and the board may feel different, but I kind of feel like we're getting a loosey-goosey presentation from Comcast of, you know,
Yeah.
we don't have some pretty important answers, and what's the difference between this contract and the old contract? And, yeah, well, no, it's like maybe there's some little of that.
Agreed.
You know, if they're interested in renewing the contract, the least they could do is, and, well, this is nothing personal, but I think they could have presented somebody who had the facts and figures at hand and could make a presentation that, you know, if you're trying to get a new contract, generally, when I deal with my clients, I don't walk in and go, well, you know, it's kind of, it's a good contract. Just sign it." And oh, by the way, I forgot to send one to you 6 years ago.
Right. Yeah, so I'm,
I want to table it. personally.
I'm inclined to.
Any other comments before we close the public hearing? We don't need to. We can just-
Drag it out, right.
I'm gonna make a motion to table it for now, so until we get more information.
Oh, I thought we were gonna make a motion to close the public.
I'll make a motion to close. Favor? Aye. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the November 7th minutes. I had a chance to review them. I only had one question, and I just need clarification. It was on the benefit change for the health insurance, for the life insurance. I just don't, the 264 and the 210, I just want to check with Carrie in before I say sign off on it. But other than that, everything else was good that I can find out.
She was quick.
Yeah, that was a pretty lame presentation. Can't believe they came in with virtually no meaningful information.
Well, I mean, Hub 66 sent people here and stood in front of the room and addressed the public and answered any questions they had.
Yeah.
So.
But I'm
Yeah.
Comcast. You have no choice.
Anyway,
All right,
she's already gone, so she
Yeah.
didn't even say about it.
okay. Jack, you want to walk through the floodplain changes?
And I'm gonna turn that over to John.
Oh,
Making a
They-
motion to approve the minutes, by the way.
I'm not, because I want to check on
Table it.
the numbers.
Thanks.
Okay, so I just-
FEMA has revised some of the maps in Grafton County. And they concentrated on the Pemigewasset Valley. And Bryant Pond drains into that. And the Smith River in Grafton drains that way, so they modified some of the maps that are Pemigewasset oriented. So they modified the northeast corner of the town, and they modified the
Oh.
eastern corner of the town.
Yep.
And the southern border of the town. So you've got a very small portion. It's not all Bryant Pond, it's part of Bryant Pond. It's Moose, in the south, it's Moose Brook and Gulf Brook. Both of those have short sections that are included in the maps. So, but 95% of the town didn't have a map change. So we have to adopt this, and select board has to adopt these new maps. And then we include them in the floodplain ordinance. And that just keeps you in a position where you can buy flood insurance in town.
Okay. Do I need to read this out loud for you, or is that good enough?
That's good enough. All you have to do is sign it. You don't even have to talk about it. You just sign it.
We do, I will ask that get included into the minutes in its entirety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That this,
Well, I mean, the actual pursuit of the RSA is a lot of location and
Yeah,
numbers, so
right.
there's a lot of 3 3s and 0 0s and 9s and 8s.
Yeah, we were hoping you'd read it just for.
It's just for the
Yeah, if you read the fine print there, 3 of those maps have a 2024 date. You know, the rest of those maps have a 2008 date. It's in the words there, but it's hard to read
Okay,
because there's so many numbers.
This is the proposed language that they advanced, and so again, we just have to incorporate it in order to remain your eligibility for flood insurance provision purposes.
Good.
so do we have to make a motion to accept that?
You do.
I would make a motion to accept the updated floodplain. provision.
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye. Thank you, John.
Okay, we have our first nonprofit coming in to discuss the tax changes. Is anybody here from New Hope Church?
I'll stand just because I can't quite see everyone over the chairs.
Go ahead.
So thank you for giving us an opportunity to address the concern. For the first time in 45 years, our church received a tax bill. And in looking at that, we are convinced that the reason is the assessor interpreted the statute for houses of worship too strictly. In other words, it speaks there of either a pastor, convent, or monastery must be living in the building. And we have another staff person who lives in the building, not myself as pastor, but we have another staff person who, in lieu of any salary, because we can't afford to give them a salary, we cover the utilities of the building for them. And so even in speaking with the New Hampshire Department of Revenue, they said that they do feel that that statute is written in such a language that the spirit is to cover other positions. Because there are other denominations and religious organizations that do not have pastors, they go by other names or things like that. So that is just meant to be sort of a parameter. And I think we demonstrated as a church over the years, we always want to be law abiding. We worked well with the historic district that we're a part of, and John knows that. At one time I served on that committee. And so we certainly don't want to escape responsibilities we do have. But we do feel that based on that statute, that having another staff person in there is the equivalent of having someone in leadership like myself as a pastor in there.
So my interpretation was it was the leader of the church could live on site and be in the apartment. And I mean, that's the way the statute's written. It is.
Well, it
pretty clear
mentions
that-
pastors, monasteries, and convents.
Well,
Technically, a
so I think that
convent.
was the monasteries and convents was aligning to the church, to the building. But the pastor, head of church was, my understanding was what the living space was.
But if you take a strict understanding, then you're eliminating other religious groups that would fit in that category. So there's no mention for rabbis, no mention for priests, because the spirit of the statute, my understanding, is it was meant to not be confining, but open to include those other aspects.
So do you have anything, well, you said you talked to the Department of Revenue, do you have anything for them?
Well, no, they said
They're
the
the ones that make
process.
the law, so.
Well, they said the process would be to come before your select board and appeal and look to them first. Then again, move forward if an abatement form, and I have those forms, but following that process, but they directed me to bring this to your attention.
So, I mean, any other thoughts from the board? I mean, I think that's the process is you should get something from the state saying that that's what they meant. when they
But
wrote the
that's
law.
not what they told me. They
But
told
then-
me to
but
talk to
then
you.
Bring that into the abatement form. I want to see that from the state because you're asking.
Dan, is that the form is that the information that we got from?
Okay.
Just looking, just thinking back that he stated that there was revenue generated from the apartment.
No, there's no revenue at all.
It's been a little bit considerate today, so.
And I could understand that if we were
Well, that's the
renting it
apartment
out.
for sale.
That's not at all.
What is the statute that you are referring?
What I'm referring to.
Say 72:23.
Yeah, I can read this. It says houses of public worship, parish houses, church parsonages occupied by their pastors, convents, monasteries, buildings, and lands appertaining to them owned and occupied directly for religious training or for other religious purposes by any regularly recognized and constituted denomination, creed, or sect, organized and incorporated or legally doing business in this state, and the personal property used by them for the purpose for which they were established. And clearly the position that we have, in addition to myself, Director of Christian Education and Music Ministry, fits in with our mission of the church to respond to our community, to make disciples for Jesus Christ. So it is a perfect in line with our religious purposes and direction.
I'm sorry, what's the title of the person that lives in the apartment? You just said.
I spoke to Bill. Do you
No,
want me to
that's-
stop?
Oh, no.
Your employee.
Yeah,
And that lives in the
Oh, new-
apartment, what is their title?
Oh, so we're a part of Church Venture Network, which is under which we have our nonprofit.
No, that's that one person that lives in the apartment.
Her job.
Oh,
title.
Ashley Arsenal.
What are they, what do they do at the church? They're not a
They're,
pastor.
no, they're Director of Christian Education and Music.
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
And as I mentioned, their services are in lieu of, we can't afford them financially. So in lieu of that, again, the church is really one building. We're talking about a parsonage, but it's all a part of the same
Same
building.
Right. What is it, RSA 72, what?
I don't have the number before. me.
7223, and it's section section 4. Subsection Roman numeral 3.
Okay.
Yeah. When an organization fills out the forms to request the abatement, does that go back to Todd for his interpretation? Because there's a lot more information that's included in that packet, or does that just come to us?
My experience is that he would weigh in and make some sort of recommendation that you could either agree with or not agree with. In the same way that that got us here, basically,
Okay,
because he made the recommendation. You accepted that recommendation, they got the tax bill, and here they are. So if you choose to interpret that differently than Todd did originally, right, then you would change that. You would reject his recommendation and find comfort in the statute that would make room for this.
so for me personally, I would like to have that packet submitted to Todd to review. I mean, that's his skill set and that's what he does and what we hire him for. And I think, you know, if you provide more information and a letter that describes all the things that you just told us, because it seems like he may not have been aware of that when he made his initial recommendation.
May I add something? So I'm an elder at the church.
Mhm.
I was actually present when Mr. Hayward came and did his assessment.
Okay.
He was present for maybe 10 minutes. He asked very few questions. He asked almost nothing related to the role of the person who was occupying the residence portion of the building. So I was very available to offer that. I was trying to sort of stay out of his way because it seemed like he had a lot to do that day. But I do think that this understanding that has been interpreted by Mr. Hayward is based on a lack of definition. So when I emailed him after we heard this and asked him what the definition of pastor he was using, he presented me with a copy of a Google definition. We both spoke with the Department of Revenue. They said that the state doesn't have a formal definition for that word. And so it is left, I think, up to the municipality, which is the governing body that makes the final decision, to hear the arguments and to make a decision. Mr. Hayward, I'm sure he's very good at his job. I'm sure that he has lots of experience, but I think ultimately the intent of the statute appears to be designed not to disadvantage religious organizations that are making use of their property for religious reasons. And the Director of Christian Education, her role directly contributes to the religious purpose of the organization. And without her being able to occupy that residence, then that purpose would not be able to be fulfilled. So it seems like a direct application of what the statute
So
intends.
I understand all that, but I think that's the process of the abatement, to Sadie's point, is to write all that out and get your conversations with the state, because if the state is saying they're not gonna support their definitions, then I would agree with you, but you know, my understanding what a pastor is would be the leader of the church, and that's where.
But then that would again limit you to just Protestant denominations.
Well, so
Can I,
And that clearly isn't the intent.
I'm looking at the law. And I think this is the most up-to-date version, but it says houses of public worship, comma, parish houses, comma, church parsonages occupied by their pastors, comma, convents, comma, monasteries, comma, buildings, comma, and the lands of
appertaining to them owned, used and occupied directly. It seems to me, maybe a misreading of the statute. The statute in this version indicates that it's not houses of public worship in which the pastor is living. It is houses of public worship, comma, parish houses, comma, church parsonages occupied by the pastor. So the pastor occupying it appears to apply only to a parsonage, not the house of worship itself. That's appears to be the law.
And you're saying that portion of that building is officially your parsonage?
Well,
Yeah, it's all one building.
I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think that the definition that I've found for parish house is actually probably closer to the arrangement. Traditionally, a parsonage is a separate building
Mhm.
that is occupied. Sometimes it's on the same parcel of land.
Mhm.
And the intent of the law seems to be not to allow that to be used for like rental properties. The idea that we would turn a parsonage into an Airbnb and a source of revenue or something like that.
Sure.
But when a building is self-contained and the top portion is used for storage, there's no question that that's all part of the same building. It all falls under the same tax exemption. A parish house is typically a portion of a building where either someone who is part of the religious organization lives, or sometimes they'll use it for community members who are suffering housing shortages. But it's a portion of the building that's not a part of the house of worship section, but it's a portion of the building that is used for religious purposes, which may include housing. So, for example, in the Roman Catholic model, you may have somebody who's not the priest or the pastor of the church that still lives in parish housing, and they would be considered part of the religious exemption. So I think the narrow understanding of this does limit things. So for example, if we had two pastors at the church, one of them would traditionally be considered the lead pastor and one would be an associate pastor. Would we so narrowly define this that only the lead pastor could occupy the parsonage or the parish house in order to get tax exemption? That seems like an obviously overly narrow interpretation of the statute.
I would agree with you.
Right, so many denominations would call the person who's living in the parsonage a pastor. We have a different title from our religious convictions, but she's serving a religious purpose. She's leading the congregation on Sunday mornings in worship. She's prepared lessons to teach the church. She helps to coordinate our community outreaches. She's an active part of the community. John can attest to that. So I don't think that there's any reason other than a disagreement on the way words are being used that justifies a difference in understanding of who it is that's occupying this building. And if that portion of the building was empty and unused, this wouldn't be a question at all. It's
Right.
all one building. It's not as though we're renting out a portion of the building for revenue or to someone who's not associated with the church in any way.
Whether you're not getting cash or not, you're getting a service for rental property, so. To Sadie's point, though, I think the process should be, put all this in writing and with your arguments and put it in the abatement form and come back to us. I mean,
Yeah, I think we need the abatement
Right.
form to consider it. We
Right.
have to have that package.
because at this point, because the state forced us into this role to some extent. We're gonna have this conversation with every nonprofit, and the response has been the same, is that once you get your tax bill, just fill out the abatement form with your argument. And,
Okay, but in addition, you want a letter to go to Todd? Explain.
no, it'll come to us.
I guess you mean
You're gonna
just
drop
in
it
that
off at the
abatement
town,
form.
you're gonna drop it off at the town office.
Yep.
I'll navigate the arrangement with Todd and we'll have discussion and make sure that we get the whole picture and represent fairly.
Right,
Yeah.
we will get the
I
form.
mean, we
filled out.
obviously want to reach the right outcome for the right reason.
Yeah.
And,
Quite frankly, my take on this is just like Stephen said, in a sense, our hand was kind of forced. And I am not opposed to changing my mind based off information and factual paper.
Mhm.
Part of, quite honestly, what I'm looking forward to is getting folks like yourself to fill out all the paperwork, get it in front of me. And I want to sit, to be honest with you, and I want to debate our tax assessor as to why you shouldn't get your exemption.
Right.
So I'm coming at it from your side, right, or that side as a whole, because I think that's my job.
Yeah.
So, but I can't do that if I don't have that information. And like Sadie said, quite frankly, we're required now to have that part of the process, so we can now go forward with it.
Right.
But
I do, in fairness to this board and all boards, the DRA has been ramping down and actually overturning some abatements and forcing the town to send out tax bills when they disagree with the
I
outcome.
know.
In this town and in many communities, people filed for abatements and they just got them and nobody ever questioned the thing. If you had the word church or nonprofit, you just, and so, you know, the DRA was beginning to feel quite justly that there was no scrutiny whatsoever paid to these. And potentially with, you know, significant tax dollars at risk. And so they've simply begun to enforce and review and reverse some casually off the cuff historic tax exemptions.
Right.
So it isn't trying to create a pickle, but the law, DRA is pretty clear that the loosey-goosey days are over. So.
But I do believe that this board, from the conversations I've had, want to do our due diligence to make sure that we're trying to stay as down the center of that as we can. We're not being forced to one side or the other, and we're not just following to one side or the other.
Sure,
And
and that
so-
certainly is what we would want
Yeah.
as well. I just have one last question. I don't want to belabor. So we have the forms, we can get those filled out, get into the town office. What happens with the date for that is like December 11th when the taxes have to be paid. Right, correctly, I believe it said on the form, December 11th.
It's a due date or 15th or something.
And my question is,
So
obviously,
you've
this will
got
take
30
some
days to
time.
get the abatement form in from that date, correct? Okay.
Okay, but you don't have to pay the taxes.
Obviously, if the taxes end up getting abated, then there's no money that's due anyway, so.
No, correct, but in
No, I
one
mean-
place on the form, it mentioned you have to pay them by the 11th, and then you could get them back.
For not paying on time, because you're in contention, you're putting something together, so.
Okay,
That would be. my-
I know the question, do I have to pay in order to get the abatement? And
No.
I
that's
think
not
the answer is we're gonna work.
so that would not be,
No.
okay, all right.
Or,
Assuming,
was a
but if
concern.
it comes January and you haven't done anything, or made any indication
right,
you're having
correct.
trouble, then yes, we're gonna want.
Okay,
so then we're gonna send you a bill.
no, no,
Uh,
that's.
But yeah, I
perfectly
don't think
understandable.
our position is, you know, if you haven't paid the taxes, wow, you're right. Let's go through this abatement process.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
good,
think
thank you
that's-
for answering my questions.
Yeah, you
Thank
are. Thank you for
Thank
coming
They're
in.
coming, sorry it's been a little disruptive over the path, but.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate your listening to
Can I
us.
just
and-
ask what your names are? Sorry,
Excuse me?
No, I don't even know what your names are.
Oh, Kevin Schwab.
I'm
and
Tony Olson.
Thank you, gentlemen.
So get me whatever you want. I'll make arrangements with Todd and have a discussion with him and make sure that we. Perhaps tee this up in some sort of memorandum that really describes everything that everybody's happy with, and see if we can reach an outcome.
Okay, and I just need to get like your name and email or.
Oh, no.
So-
No.
No.
I'll get that to you. I have your email, so I'll
Okay.
reach out to you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas, you have a discuss, Eden Community Center update.
So last spring. The board established a committee to look at. Properties in the town specifically with a specific interest in the log cabin store. For the old log cabin store. And over the course of time, as that committee met, we were looking at the possibility of a community center. The town has indicated over a long number of years an interest in getting a community center. And so we looked at that, made an initial recommendation to the board back in spring. And the committee felt like in the fall, we had not gotten back together and there had not been any action, understandingly, other things going on. So the committee felt like we should get back together. And so 6 of us did meet and had a conversation and tried to take into account what had happened over time with the town's budget and everything else. And so we came back. We did a sort of minutes of that meeting as essentially a recommendation to the board again. At least our current thoughts. I sent that in and then I resent it for this meeting. I don't know whether the board's had a chance, but to look at it, but essentially. What we believe at this moment is, given the budget constraints on the town. And given the demands on that budget that will probably not be met. Maintenance of buildings, et cetera, that. We can't fix everything in 1 year. Our thought was that. The building that the library is currently in. Is a property that the town wants to keep and wants to maintain. And it needs maintaining. And so we thought our recommendation was to consider immediately looking for a grant, perhaps, to rehabilitate or install a new elevator and do whatever is required to make the third floor more accessible. That in the short term, we consider using that third floor for community center activities once the new elevator is in. And that in that interim period, however long it is, 3 to 5 years, perhaps longer, that the town look at other options longer term for a community center. The Community Development Finance Authority had a grant opportunity in the spring that we simply didn't have time to put in. They did have a second round this fall. They opened it in September. I have not been able to figure, they were opening it in September without an end date, basically said when they run out of funds. I've been unable to find out whether they have closed it, whether they've run out of funds or not. I don't know whether that's still there. Again, I'm not sure that we're prepared to go that route. But I do think that there are planning grant opportunities that we should try to pursue as a town to help us get a better sense of, what we might be able to do with the existing properties that the town owns, and longer term going for community center. And then, we have a couple of other recommendations. Longer term, is that building that the library currently exists in, is that the best place for a library? Should we consider a new library? I think these are all longer term conversations that the town needs to have. And then, and that was essentially, we also thought that both the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission and the Municipal Association might be helpful in terms of determining what grants may be available. Part of our longer term conversation was looking at the log cabin property, either to be rehabilitated, the property itself could be considered for rehabilitation, considered for demolition and a new structure, or a sale, private sale to a private owner. And the possibility, particularly for a community center, of acquiring another building in town. One of the possibilities, obviously, is the Methodist Church, which I don't know whether they're going to be considering selling it, but it is soon no longer be serving as a house of worship. So anyway, so those are the recommendations. It's in the document we submitted. Monica, did I miss anything?
No.
John? To get the CBDG grants, you have to go do their training. You have to jump through their hoops. You have to get like 8 hours of training from them. That's how you get into their
This wasn't CDBG, this was CDFA.
CDF, I mean, it's the same animal, I mean, that's the thing, you have to
But it
go
was a
to.
different, but it was a different grant.
Yeah.
It was a grant from, basically the infrastructure, the federal infrastructure
Yeah.
bill.
community
And it
loan
was,
fund.
it was $1 million up to $1 million for a community center. There are different, you're right, for CDBG, there are certain trainings that you have
You
to.
have to
hoops you
attend,
have to
there's
jump
usually
through.
two.
There are
in the
different
spring.
hoops for this one.
Yeah.
Again, it felt like we weren't far enough along in the planning for a community center to jump through those hoops.
If I remember right from the meetings, really, it would benefit us to pursue a planning. Some sort of planning grant or whatever, because that is really the first process that they want to see before they consider giving you any money or not. is
Exactly.
That you've been through the planning process,
Exactly.
so that's where we need to start.
Yes, sir.
Larry?
Larry Braven, I'm not sure, but I think there's an issue with the fire suppression on the third floor of the library.
That was.
that was
addressed.
quite a
There's-
while.
there's sprinklers up there, it's the weight issue is the real problem.
Okay.
Where they can't put books up there, but and I don't know what the live floor, but that is the weight was the issue, so, but when they did the renovations in 2012 or whatever it was, probably longer ago than that, but they did put fire suppression up there.
Okay, so I just,
I'm guessing that there haven't been anyone from the library involved in the conversation. The library trustees have a plan for the third floor. They signed a contract last night to engage with an architect to help design the space, and they're submitting the CDFA grant for the planning of renovating that with some use for community space. But they're moving ahead with that. I apologize if that wasn't brought into the conversation earlier.
It was not brought into the conversation, and far be it from me, look, I'm 110% supportive of the library and,
So
but I will say it is a town property. And
So no, nothing's been approved, they're not like starting construction, but they're trying to put plans together of what
You know,
that space could be to present.
again, what we were simply trying to do was put options on the table for the board to consider, you know, in terms of, if the library can use the third floor, and we're simply saying, look, there's clearly a demand for a community center of some sort.
Yes.
There are all sorts of rationales, not the least of which is a place to vote. Never mind, all of the other functions that would be helpful. And we simply wanted to, having gone through the spring and come back with recommendations that were, we felt like we wanted to revisit it and come back and say, okay, so where are we? We also saw this potentially, particularly if you upgrade the elevator, we saw it as an opportunity to invest money in a building that we want to preserve, whether it's the library using all of the floors, or it's a community center, or it's something else that the town chooses. The building itself needs to be preserved.
yeah, and I think because of the weight restrictions and I didn't see all of the plans, it was a quick meeting last night, but they're not planning to have a lot of books and things upstairs, but be more of a community space. Elevator, there would be a new elevator, and someone threw out your name and they would be contacting you for some help with something, Tom, so. I'm not exactly.
Give Jack's email.
You won't let me have it.
Yeah.
Oh,
To Sadie's point, the last I heard about library, what they were looking for is really open space that could be flexed and used in a variety of methods, so
Yeah.
it sounds very similar.
it may, yeah,
Same
it may
place.
work, yeah, it absolutely may work.
And they just need the plans from the architect to submit with that grant application with many other things.
And that's one of the differences between their ability to grab more quickly the CDFA funding is they have a plan, they have a team, they have a champion, they have staff that can put this together, gather all their thoughts together and present it.
But isn't there an element missing there? Isn't that a town building? And don't they have to present this to the
They
select board?
I think they will.
They will.
But I think they will, but at this point, they're using their own expendable money, I think so.
Sure, but I mean, if they're going forward with getting things to apply for a grant. All right,
No,
they're getting
they-
ready to apply for it, but they're not actually applying for it. Is that
Well, I
what
think
we're-
they probably have applied for it under their authority as trustees of the library. With the,
I think they have a lease, right? Don't they have an extended lease? on
Yeah, but if I lease your apartment, I can't subdivide it to put another apartment in the other half of it. If it's the town's building, they should be coming to the board of select, to the select board. And presenting us with what they're thinking about doing. That way, we're on the same page and we don't get an organization that's putting time and effort into it. And there's some sort of a, at no fault of anyone, but a miscommunication.
Well,
And if they're thinking about applying for grants or going ahead with architectural plans to apply for and procure grants. That tells me they've already made a decision with what they want to do at the top floor. But at last I knew, we were voted in by the town. To kind of oversee what we do with the town buildings, no? Am I right or wrong? Am I missing something?
Well, and I've only been on that committee since March, but
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, haven't they been talking about renovations to the third floor for a long time? They've been fundraising for it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was something that happened previously.
And I don't think it's been. Yeah, I mean, they've been talking about it
Years.
for years. So,
Right.
but, I don't think it's anything they're doing outside of the purview of what they've been looking at.
Yeah, I don't mean to intend that they're kind of trying to do something. Behind anybody's back or that's not where I'm going, but I think if we're at the point where we're getting ready to apply for grants and architectural. Designs for ideas of what the space is going to be, not what it could be, but it is going to be used for. Then it was at the point where it should have been presented to the select board. That's what I'm saying. If the committee for the library has decided what they want to do with that space. And they're at the point where they're spending money on architectural plans and getting ready for a grant. Then they've already made a clear decision of what they want the space to be used for. So, I mean, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but and I'm not even saying I'm in disagreement with it. I'm just saying if that's the process, that's a process. We're holding a lot of different people to the process that has been neglected for the last decade. And I think we need to hold everybody to the process. And one of the things I think, as far as, you know, with the potential monkey wrench with you guys' thought process on using that as an interim community center. Have being part of the committee, I did miss the last meeting, but I attended hours and hours with the rest of you guys on the rest of it. And I know we toured all of the buildings and properties that we own in the downtown village. But I wondered, you know, we have the thought process of maybe using an available space at the library in the interim. Is there the thought process of using an available space at the senior center in the interim? And I know when we toured there's not a whole lot of activity that happens in that building. And there is a second floor in that building. There's a functioning library and there's a functioning set of stairs and there's wheelchair handicap accessibility. So I wonder if that's something, if now that it's looking as though we in all probability won't move forward with that idea at the library. Maybe we should approach the folks at the senior center because it is only a part-time thing.
Yeah, I think, I mean, honestly, Dan, I think the idea in the meeting in October. The idea was simply. What might we do in the short term?
Right.
And thinking through the fact is that we all felt like. The building where the library sits now.
Sure.
Is a town property that has not been maintained as well as it might have been.
Sure.
And that there may be an opportunity in the short term to find grant funding that would help begin to fix the issues with painting and maintenance and, you know, whatever else, and get that building, you know, move that building back to a place where it was. So something to preserve the building as well as potentially provide a short-term space. Now,
Could we
if-
shift that thought to the senior center?
I think we absolutely could shift the space thought And but if, it sounds like if the library trustees are thinking about the third floor as an open space and not for stacks, because the weight, the floor won't hold stacks of books.
Yeah.
Then they might already be thinking along those lines.
Sure.
Question I have, Jack. And maybe I'm wrong. If the library trustees, if they're going for a grant, does the grant have to be approved by the town?
Yes.
My understanding is that trustees have their own independent authority to propose and forward their operation expenses to the voters. And the select board does the same thing with the operating budget, but I don't think that the board oversees or can veto the library projects.
But the town would
Voters.
vote on accepting
Yeah,
any
yeah,
grant.
Of course, yeah.
So,
So the not infrequent awkwardness is, on the one hand, you own the outside of the building, on the other hand, you've given the library the inside of the building. And they're running with it, they're doing what they want to do. And hence the bit of a rub in terms of where does one authority stop and the other one begin? And how do you dovetail those?
well, in the end, it all ends with the voters.
Yes, yeah, but in the meanwhile, you have to kind of play well between the two. When I walked around with the library folks and our contractor the other day, talking about the outside. We talked about the potential nexus between inside renovations, which is separate from the outside, related to the library, appropriate for the use of the library funds that they've raised for that purpose. But that some external changes, like the elevator, would have to penetrate the exterior, and that would would help do some of the repairs on the outer skin of the building. Because you gotta cut holes and do things and replace siding and that sort of thing. So there's a little bit of a crossover there in that you can't avoid touching the outside of the building, and so the building will benefit generally because of what the library trustees want to do with the inside of the building. So then it's this discussion, obviously they don't have a full, they just hired the architect, so they don't have a plan to kind of present to anybody yet.
Right.
Right, but they have a process to determine what are their space needs, what offices, how much space, what would be the function, kind of a space needs analysis. That's the preparatory work that will set the stage for them to get potentially that money from CDFA, because they now have a plan and they have people that can carry it out.
Well,
That'll affect the outside of the building somewhat.
to your point, Tom, and Dan's, is that, until October, you guys weren't looking at the seniors or that building for your community center, so. I mean, that's the first I'd heard that you were looking to pivot to that as a temporary structure.
No, that's-
Temporary option, so.
I mean, I think that's correct. Essentially, what had happened was initially, we were looking at this grant in the spring.
Yeah.
And could we get it, what realistically was there? We decided it was not
Yeah.
realistic. And the question is, where do we go from there? And we kind of had a hiatus in the summer, and came back in the fall and said, all right, so now what's realistic? And the immediate piece of the conversation seemed to go to the issue of maintaining buildings owned by the town, which led to the library building, which led to the conversation, well, what about the third floor as a short term?
So,
Other short-term possibilities like the senior center, are certainly, but we were trying to combine a short-term idea with
understood.
rehabilitation.
I just, back to Dan, I don't think it was two committees conflicting with each other. I think it was just two different approaches to the same thing.
Yeah, it was, I mean, honestly, in hindsight, our committee probably should have asked the library what they thought.
Probably wouldn't have hurt.
Yeah, no,
Has anybody ever considered doing just the opposite of what you were talking about? And let the library remodel the log cabin to open up the library's been a problem for the last 35 years that I've been here with that building. It's always been an issue. I've always said, let the library build a new building or come up with something that's a single level floor because of the weight. There's so much weight and,
Yeah.
there's no access for handicap, and it goes on and on and on. and on.
Right.
Why can't we look at the log cabin for the library?
Well, I don't think we should be looking, the log cabin property possibly, but the log cabin is.
Well, that's what I mean,
We should not be looking at doing anything with that building, so quite
But
frankly.
the,
in my opinion, But
that property would be perfect
property.
It's just the
for.
property.
for a
Yeah, I
library.
mean, I know the library as a whole feels very strongly about being the centerpiece of the town. And that's-
They still would be, you know what I mean, over there, it'd be,
Mhm.
A little bit less so.
In a way, if you will, this kind of comes back to a conversation that came up a few weeks ago about the master planning process. You know, the idea of a master planning process done kind of in the way that they're normally done, takes all of those things into consideration and tries to do the integration rather than a committees, another committee, and then differences of opinion. So a real master plan should take the time to take into consideration all of the infrastructure needs of the town. What is the future gonna look like? I'm always loath to have towns sell property that they've actually spent money to buy. Because in the future, you're gonna have to buy land anyway.
Right.
It's always
Because
more
it doesn't
expensive.
change.
Mhm.
So, and I don't know, I know there's Tom and others that I think spoken about kind of a bootstrap master plan. But that really would kind of help integrate a number of buildings and a number of conversations and get community involvement to really kind of galvanize a single direction that you can move on a variety of fronts for those purposes.
Well,
I would, if I could just, I'm sorry.
sorry.
Just in terms of the master plan, completely agree, Jack, and that's one of the things our committee, the community center committee, if I can refer to it that way.
Yeah.
Was trying to do was buy some time to give us time to do that kind of planning, to both perhaps get a planning grant as well as do the master plan, to consider all of the town inventory and to consider issues like, is that the best place for the library? Yes, that's the center of town now, but could we do some things on Depot Street that would help make, maybe shift the center of gravity to the,
Right.
And make Depot Street, revive Depot Street as a part of the center of town.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a whole range of things,
There is,
but you need time to sort of go through that.
that is true.
And what we were trying to do was say, we got this space, maybe we can solve 3 issues quickly, rehabbing the building, finding some short-term space for a community center, and buying time to do a broader plan.
My personal sense is that the library's been there a long time, and unless you're gonna get into a real battle, that's probably a non-starter.
Yeah,
Just a
we have
sense.
voted not even that long ago to keep the library where it is. Maybe in the last 10 years, I don't know if I'm, but it was a very strong vote that we keep the library where it is. And the amount of money that the library has put into that building has been tremendous, and not even that long ago. It is handicap accessible, not to the 3rd floor, but you can use the elevator to get up to the main floors. And we are losing ground in our center of town. Your town offices, they're bad. They're really bad. And I can't believe that they were the police station and whatever.
Jack's calling it home now. That's
Sorry
pretty
to-
insulting. Yeah.
To be insulting, but
That's all right.
that's my, I'm sorry. That's,
I'll go after you.
that's my statement exactly is, we've put millions and millions and millions of dollars into that white elephant, and all I ever hear is how bad a shape it's in. I know the basement of that place is
beautiful
awful.
condition.
I've been down in there, I had to
Larry,
fix the pump.
you're talking about the outside? 'Cause
I'm talking about the whole building,
No, that's not
the
true.
library area is
No.
beautiful,
Yeah,
but the rest of the buildings, you just said the town offices
but
are
that's,
disgusting. You go down into the basement of that building. And if the pump shuts off for 20 minutes, you get a foot of water there. It's just that whole building, the 3rd floor is what it is. the library is beautiful, but there's been millions and millions of taxpayer dollars that have gone into that building. And it seems to
I
just
don't,
fly
I don't
away.
think that's true.
Well, even if it's a grant, it's still tax money from somewhere.
Right,
It doesn't just appear. And that was words that were given to me. Because I was like, it's grant money, it's not taxpayer. Well, it was somebody's tax dollars, some might not have been everybody in this room only, but we contributed to it, you know? Yeah, what? Talking.
Listen, are you Dan?
I am.
Grants, go for the grants, go.
Oh, I agree with go for grants. I don't think we can say that they're not tax dollars.
You know, it's his birthday, so
That's
right.
he's turned the corner. He's walking
Yeah.
towards the
I
light.
was 61 when I walked in, I'm 75 now, see where I am. I do agree with getting grants, but that's my point, is I was always pushing where it's free money, it's free money, it's free money. I think it might be free money depending on the term of the grant and how much of it needs to be reimbursed by that. But it is taxpayer dollar, it comes from somewhere, it just didn't magically appear, so, yeah, and I'm Dan.
Mark?
So I heard in this conversation about the Methodist Church may not be a worship center anymore. That is a vital piece of the town.
Yes.
I think that should be something that if it doesn't become, if it's not a worship center anymore. I think that would be a perfect place for a community center. You're already utilizing the parking there for the advanced transit. And that should be something I think would be looked at if that's what's gonna be happening, because that really is a focal point of the town.
I have been advocating for a community center since the very first second that I was voted in as select board member. And one of the things that has been rightfully so fed back to me is you have to keep into consideration the maintenance costs going forward. So the renovation, the cost to purchase that building, right? I don't necessarily disagree with you, but 2.5 years into it, I see things with different information than I did 2.5 years ago, right?
Oh.
So if we've got to purchase the building, renovate the building, and then the cost to maintain that building, which is of the same era of the library, that we can't figure out how to keep that maintained. And we can't figure out how to tear down the log cabin store to build a new building there that would, for the most part, be very little maintenance for 6, 8, 10 years. I personally don't see how we can come up with the money. I think it would be a great space too. It's got parking. It's on Route 4. It's basically in downtown. But that's probably a conversation for another day, but I mean.
I think because it's an older building, it would be a lot easier to get a grant to renovate or restore that, because, I mean, when was that built? I mean, probably the 1700s.
1840, I think it's the third block.
I think it would be.
Right,
That's
exactly.
probably
It was the only church that made it to the fire.
I think it would be easier to, and I may be wrong, but what I'm learning about the grant processes and stuff, right? I'm learning a ton through this whole deal, is it may be easier to procure grants to fix that building to remain that church. But if you want to take that old building and grant money to turn it into a community center, I'm not sure the process would be any easier. Is kind of what I'm finding going through this. You're doing something different with the building. That's kind of like with the meeting house. We were able to get grants with it, but it's very strict on what it does with that. You know what I mean? Does that make sense to you, Mark? And I don't know for sure, but just this conversation, food for your thought too, because I like your thought process and your ideas. But I'm not positive, you know, so, yeah.
So I've heard a couple of times, few times over the few months of the demise of the Methodist Church. Is that real? Have we actually heard it from them or?
Yes.
Okay, and is there a timeline or any
I-
real sort of decision about that?
Here's what I know. Several people who are congregants have confirmed that they are. That whatever, I'm a Catholic, so I don't know what the Methodist structure is, but whatever the ruling folks have made the decision that they're going to move out. I had a conversation with the pastor in early June, the day of the memorial for the fire, and he indicated at the time that they were going to do, he was committing to do some sort of listening town meeting kind of thing to get input from the community. And I asked at the time, I said, well, please make sure, I would like to be included in that. And he committed to do that. I have not heard back from him. I saw the pastor whenever they did their service at the meeting house this summer. I saw him again and he said that they had not gotten to that point yet, but he recommitted that, that I explained to him, what we were talking about with the community center, et cetera. So I haven't heard any more, but my understanding is that they are, I don't know what the timetable is, but my understanding is that they are planning on going forward with. At the time in June, one of the things he said to me was that they were looking at low income housing
That's what
in the building. Now, that was just. I don't think they have a plan for it. I think that was just somebody had thrown out that idea. But
Well, that does seem a bit of a stretch from putting up for sale or transferring the ownership.
I don't know. That's the thing. I
Okay.
don't know, honestly, Jack. I don't know that they were planning on selling it.
That would be a drawback.
But if they use it for housing, then they can.
Right.
But I will tell you one thing.
You know what I mean?
No,
Community center, if it's.
I don't know that they have made a decision whether to maintain, whether to hold on to the building and use it for other purposes like housing, or whether they,
Okay,
or whether they would sell it, or whether they would consider either, depending on the circumstances.
I understand.
I just know that, at some point in the not too distant future, they're not gonna be using it as a house of worship.
Understood.
John?
In 2005, and I guess I'm gonna go to John Bergeron, didn't they actually do studies to improve the library? Where they were actually gonna have 3 floors with the elevator? And then they scaled it back? And that was CBDG grant that they got. I was gonna say $600,000-$700,000, which was a lot of money in 2005.
Yeah, the only thing I know is that the third floor has been assigned to the library for many years. And they've had a goal of doing something with it, but they have never gotten to the point of doing something.
MTD's did a bunch of stuff on that years ago.
Yeah.
So John, to your point, yeah, I've seen architectural drawings of an elevator bay on the end of the building.
With the architectural drawing with the thing is that there's somebody did planning and actually somebody did the engineering on it. So it's out there somewhere, probably.
But that's when they determined that the third floor couldn't
Support the weight. Yeah, I mean, it's they had it basically all engineered, all ready to go. And then they scaled it back. So I mean, it's gotta be out there somewhere.
But they've got I-beams up there. It's.
Yeah, I know, I've seen it, I've been
It's
up there,
good for
yeah.
some purposes, but
Yeah.
not books necessarily.
Well,
Thomas, is there a way that we can get with our community center group or whatnot? And think about an idea to approach the senior center? And just breach the subject with them before we make a decision that's.
Oh, of course. Yeah, well, and none of this was, again, none of this was decision
It's
making.
no, and that's the wrong word, before we come up with that thought process, right,
And I
before
would
we go
think you
further.
Go to the Methodist church too, and
Sure.
be very direct with them about.
Yeah.
Cause if they don't know you're interested in it, they don't know you're interested. in it.
And we can go back to Cozy Corner. You haven't seen Red Wagon, the parking lot, and Cozy Corner are gonna be on the market soon.
No,
Yes,
say it isn't so,
I heard that
I would
today.
have never guessed
I
that.
heard that from a realtor.
Huh,
God,
I'll be-
I just gave her the deed today.
maybe we can buy that back and they can make some profit.
There you go.
So,
Wait, how's St. Mary's Church doing, Tom? They doing okay, near as you know? I want to say in public.
Not that the pastor in Lebanon, and I have a very close relationship, but, I have not heard at this moment any plans. Anne Labrie may have a better take on that than I do. But, I haven't heard anything to suggest, I mean, you know, the church has been downgraded. It is both the Enfield and, St. Mary's used to be part of the Enfield parish. Enfield and Canaan have now become a mission as part of the Lebanon parish. So. But attendance on Sundays is pretty good.
If,
We'll
if
note
a,
that.
if a church decides to sell their buildings. Is that like, when you have land use, do they have to pay back taxes or they just
They don't-
walk away with
We
money?
don't pay tax.
Well, typically, I could address that only from the sense, typically the denomination has it, most churches have the dissolution clause, which where it would go back to the denomination.
Right.
So it doesn't belong to the members, they don't
Okay.
get to divide up the money, it goes back to the
Okay.
denomination.
It's a larger.
The Methodist church downtown is probably owned by the United Methodist denomination, so the local congregation would not actually be able to sell the property.
Right.
So it's likely that discussions about turning it into low-income housing is being made at the regional court level. So that would be who you would need to approach. I mean, obviously, the pastor of the church could help direct you to who to contact, but it wouldn't be the local congregation just making a decision about how to use the property.
No, that was the impression, that, you know, and again, I don't know the hierarchy of the Methodist Church or whether they have parishes like Catholic Church or how that works, but whoever the hierarchy is in the it's not a Canaan decision.
That is
I'm
correct.
not even sure it's an Upper Valley decision.
It's probably a national decision. And they'd have to vote at it on their annual conference probably.
It's similar to with the Diocese of Manchester, that they have a real estate vice president that they basically own the churches.
Right.
Sounds like a field trip, Tom.
Food for
All right.
thought on, food for thought on the low income housing, just because we seem to be in a discussion, I'll put a couple more 2 cents worth in here, so. You know, Mike Sampson and I don't always see eye to eye, but I'd like to think we left. Our relationship, learning a couple things from each other, paying attention when it did seem like something made sense, and one of the things that Mike talked to me about when I was first trying to get a handle on how this whole process works, is he pointed out the building where the Chinese restaurant is. And we were talking about how many apartments are in there, how many children are in those apartments, and what it costs our taxpayers to have those children go to our school. And there is absolutely zero benefit community wise. I mean, obviously, shouldn't say zero. There are benefit to people not being homeless. There are benefit to people having a roof over their head, all that. But tax purpose wise, it helps us negative. So and then you look at, we throw around the terminology, low income housing. I had an opportunity within the last couple of months to sit with a gentleman who was running for office in one of our larger cities, and we were talking a little bit about the housing crisis and low income houses. And my thought to him was, I don't think we start to solve that until we actually come to a realization of what low income is. And what's low income to the people who are presenting these bills and putting forward the ability to build these places is not the same as what low income is to the single parent who's working 2 jobs and can only afford $400 a month. So low income housing is not $2,000 a month. So the last thing we need in Canaan is low income housing.
Absolutely.
Is my thought. So anyway, thank you.
And you automatically lose the right to use your local people in that low income housing. You could have people from South Carolina, North, wherever.
Right.
Once you take a grant for low income housing, you open the door for the rest of the country. So the people from Canaan are not gonna benefit from low income housing.
No.
One iota.
Not at all.
And I don't mean that because of,
No,
I have any problem with low income housing. I'm all for it, like you just said.
providing.
$400
low
a
income.
month, not $2,000 a month. Not subsidy.
Okay, moving on, please. We need to discuss deliberative session and town voting and the primaries. It's gonna be busy first couple of months of the year.
So the primary, New Hampshire primary is gonna be on January 23rd, Tuesday, January 23rd. Town voting is on March 12th. Already determined. We have some leeway with the deliberative session. But we do need time to print town reports and everything like that and get it all ready, so. It has to be a minimum of, I think it's 30 days prior to the town vote. And looking at the calendar, we typically do that on a Saturday, and February 3rd lines up as the date that we're gonna do deliberative session. So I just want to get that on the record. We need to reach out to the school and let them know. Jack, please. That we have space up at the auditorium, so. Any comments on that?
These are held at the auditorium.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any idea where we're gonna do voting this year? So Ann has been working feverishly for really since the middle of summer. And really pushing, she was really trying to get St. Mary's to agree to it, and St. Mary's definitely does not want to have it there. Now, because we're up, there's a certain size requirements in space, and we're gonna be forced to use the fire station at least for the first two, the primary and that March 3rd. I've asked her to go back and look for the fall votes. And see if we've got any more options that we can look at. She's gonna approach the school, but it's even getting late for them. It's already starting to put their calendar together, but. We actually do want to get out of the fire station, but it's not gonna happen for these first two, so. Is there anything going on with racetrack that they?
So, yeah, he's got cars in that building, there's no, yeah, so he's storing vehicles in there, so.
Just for the record, I doubt it's a St. Mary's decision. It is much more likely it is a decision being made by the parish priest in Lebanon. Holy Cross.
Jack and Ann have been trying to get him convinced to make a decision. He finally made a decision, and he said no.
I've been dealing with the diocese and Father Charles, and
Say again?
I said I've been dealing with the diocese, the real estate
Yeah.
guy at the diocese, and as well as Father Charles, as well as the bishop. And they're all ceding to the decision of Father Charles, and they're concerned about liability, which is really a non-issue. And they're concerned about electioneering. That's what the bishop told Ann. I don't know quite what that means, but they're concerned that the church might be accused of.
Democracy.
Well, now as a good Catholic, I'm not gonna say that. So I don't.
I'm a good Catholic. I just.
I know. I don't know. The answer is no, and I guess the reason doesn't matter. They're not comfortable with it. We've taken
Yeah, no, I.
literally a half a dozen runs at it. to
I
try to
just,
find a
I
way.
just, I just wanted on the record that it's not a St. Mary's decision.
Is there a reason why the high school is in Canaan that we couldn't use the high school or?
Because they have to cancel school for the day to do it, so that's why, so, and we used to do it years ago, but it was on Saturday, when we voted on Saturday and did everything all at one town meeting, but. The Tuesday issue, but. No problems.
I know there are communities.
So we are approaching for next year, sorry, Dan, we are approaching for next year, because we've gotten away from that. We've used the racetrack in the past, and we had joint sort of a agreement over there. But they've since taken things up and are using it themselves, so they lost another building, so.
I know there are communities that do close their schools for voting days, and
Yep.
that's what we need to do, you know?
So
You just have to do it fast because they actually put their calendar together scary early.
And they won't change it after that. So Stan is working on that, and I know she looked at the senior center as well as far as space, but there's just not enough space in there to do it. Like the state requires certain space specifications that.
Square footage and
Square
entrance
footage,
and exit.
yeah.
There's no.
They look at the big cities and they all use schools.
Yeah.
Manchester, Concord.
Yeah,
What's wrong with the fire department?
What's that?
well, so when we vote there, all fire equipment is outside, out back. If there's a fire, all their equipment is in the fire station. Mark can probably speak to it more, but there's a real concern that we've lucked out over the years of not having any serious calls during voting.
Because it would be a mess with them having to come in to get their gear to go and leave and it's a hassle for them to pull their equipment out. You know, it's just not.
Yeah.
It's.
That makes sense.
Have we, is Cardigan Mountain School a possibility?
I don't know.
Not even thought of that.
I don't know. We'll bring it up to him. Good question.
So the primary, where is that gonna be?
So that'll be in the fire station.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
The presidential primary, January.
Yeah. sure.
Yes. Anything for other business? Larry, I mean, Mark, I just wonder what's going on with the West Mountain Bridge. Yeah, so we signed the contract, so it's moving forward. It should be sometime in the next couple of weeks before they start doing the install on it. So. Oh, the new bridge. Well, the temporary.
Temporary, I think we're anticipating a start of December 8th. It could be before then, but, yeah.
Larry.
Was I mistaken on the posting on that?
No, I saw it today when I drove by it, so I gotta follow up. I don't know what the answer was. I left it up to Bob, so I'll follow up with him. So
Okay, I
I
appreciate it.
just noticed again today.
I just don't want the town getting sued.
Yeah, yeah, so it's gonna be a moot point in 2 weeks, but I hear what you're saying. I'm not ignoring it. I just.
Okay.
So,
We're actually working with the contractor now that tonight, the contract was signed and they've given the notice to proceed. We've got the required signage to take the bridge out of service for the period of time it's going to take to put the temporary bridge up, which is a few weeks. So we got to put up the signage for that, place that. So
Okay.
that's a conversation that we actually started earlier today to coordinate with the contractor to know when the changes.
Okay, I just, E2 scares me. That's all.
I understand.
I hear you.
Yeah.
John,
Not the bridge, but another topic. We have 3 members of the Historic District Commission whose terms are up. They have 3-year terms. And Tom Milligan, Mike Roy, and alternate George Foley would like to extend for another 3 years, so we will appoint them for another 3 years.
need a motion?
I'll move to approve those 3 for another time.
I would say,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And are you?
with a thank you.
Are they putting together a request to increase the size of that board too?
Yes, on the next town ballot in March, there'll be a warrant article requesting to increase the size from 5 members to 7 members. There's enough interest, and we'll have a public hearing on December 14th at the health center. The public
That's your
can
regular
comment.
meeting?
What's that?
That's your regular meeting?
It is a regular meeting.
Yeah, I know this new grader is gonna be voted on when it comes town meeting time. Has the board of selectmen, seen the specs on this new grader?
I have not.
I have not.
Well, there's a rumor that's been out there, come from a good source.
Hmm.
It was ordered with a 12-foot moldboard on it, which is no good. We have a 13-foot moldboard. And downsizing, it's just gonna put more wear and tear on your new grader. You're gonna have to make more passes. So it don't make sense to downsize.
I heard the same information, Dale, and have questioned that.
And I've talked to other towns and they say they don't know why you wouldn't go with a 14-foot moldboard. I said, well, we got a 13 and. Especially if you have to reach out and ditch. When you have to reach out, you can't go out there with a. And with a 12-foot moldboard, you're gonna be running right into your windrow.
Thanks, Dale.
Yeah.
I've asked about it too, Dale.
Mark? I've heard, somebody say something about Hub 66. Yep. I just heard something the other day that, from somebody that supposedly a representative from them is they're filing bankruptcy.
Oh,
Anybody from the town know anything about that?
No.
In a way.
Supposedly they were a rep for Hub 66. So.
But bankruptcy doesn't mean much these days. They
Yeah.
continue to.
Bankruptcy just means you found a different way.
Hey, another one 6 times, right?
Well, the one in Enfield started out as the UNH project, and that has been 6 times. The different companies have been filed bankruptcy in that model. Anyway,
what?
same way in Enfield.
Well, they're all waiting for federal money to come in and then to run their lines and then be able to charge people that hook up, so.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a juggling match of, because I mean, they're not cheap endeavors, so. I have noticed that, co-op lines are coming down 118 like crazy from Romney area, so.
Yeah, they were just running some sort of a line on Goose Pond Road today. There was 3 bucket trucks working in unison and running something.
So
ECW.
I know Hub 66 people were out right after we had our meeting. They were out doing all the pole measurements and line sag of lines and all that. They're all over town doing that, so.
I saw them.
So, but I you know,
I
yeah,
just wanted to comment or anything, because
Right.
this was a representative from Hub 66 that told me that.
Can we reach out to the gentleman that came in here and represented Hub 66 and find that out for ourselves? Do I have his name and contact here somewhere?
anything else from anybody? All right, I have a motion to go into non-public.
Second?
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for discussion. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.